This is Create the Next from ProCFO Partners, where every week we explore strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help today's businesses put their financial picture in context.
Welcome back to Create the Next. I'm Chris Bentliff with ProCFO Partners, and I have with me today John Martin. And John, we're talking about something that I think is really interesting today, which is what got you here won't take you there. And what that brings to mind for me is I have a daughter who's 13, and every once in a while she'll say, I think I might need new shoes. And I'll check where her toe is and I'll realize, geez, you needed new shoes a long time ago. How did this happen? But she's been so busy in her life that it didn't even occur. And that came to mind for me when we were talking about starting this topic. So let's just start with what do you mean? What kind of context can you give us around today's topic of what got you here? What got you here won't get you there.
Well, that's a good analogy because it kind of creeps up on you. We should start by acknowledging that growth is a wonderful thing. Everybody wants to grow their business. However, like a lot of things in life, there are challenges. And unfortunately, in this area, the challenges can be subtle. I mean, you have to kind of proactively seek out those challenges. And, if you don't, they can inhibit growth, they can stop growth. And if they're allowed to go all the way and procedures and processes and things in the company break, they can hurt the underlying business. So, in pro sports, pro athletes kind of talk about how at each level of the game, whether it's high school, college, the pros, the game gets more challenging, more complicated. Preparation becomes more intense. The game essentially changes. And I think that's, both applicable and maybe a good way for business folks to think about their companies as they grow. Things change. It's a different playing field growing, having a $10 million company than a $20 million company than a $30 million company. I mean, you can say, gee, what's the difference between, from growing from 10 to $15 million? But if you think about it, all of a sudden there's 50% more paper that has to be processed and orders, and you probably have some new customers and some new employees. And unlike the sports analogy, this all kind of happens gradually. I mean, it's in sports, you're on a college playing field or a high school playing field. This happens a lot more gradually. I was CFO of a company where we doubled sales gradually over a number of years. And certainly where we started and where we ended was very different. But there certainly were many mid-course corrections in between. And part of that growth was from acquisition. Part of that growth was just organic growth. And I think, the acquisition growth was almost easier to deal with because everyone was aware of it. I mean, it affected all the departments. It was a priority for everybody. It was top of mind. So it was easy. Where, the organic growth, it just kind of happens gradually. And unfortunately, everybody has a day job. Everybody's busy. And to sort of, read the tea leaves that there are problems, and because they're subtle indicators. It's not flashing red lights that you have a problem, and you don't want to wait till something's broken to deal with it.
I want to talk about some of those flashing red lights, but you said some things that are interesting to me. I think that when we think about growth, there's kind of outside in, and then there's inside out. And the outside in, we might be able to point to the things that make sense, like we're growing in size, as you point out. We went from 10 to 15 million, but also tastes are changing, technology is changing, the way that people are buying or the expectations they have are buying, those things are changing, so we need to keep up. But then there's this inside out growth, which can be insidious even if it's connected to bad habits, cultural sort of dysfunction. What are some of the things that you think companies need to kind of keep their eyes open for to make sure that they're growing intentionally and not just in a reactive way, but more in a responsive way?
Well, I think, some of it is just simply planning. Again, I think a big culprit here is everyone having day-to-day time-consuming jobs and focusing on the day-to-day issues. I think, it's good for companies to sort of stand back from the day-to-day, the senior management team to sort of stand back and say, all right, where are we? Where have we come from? And really, where do we want to go? And maybe formalize that planning process to some extent, whether it's a formal 3-year strategic plan, a 1-year profit plan, just budgeting. but just, everybody's day job is very time consuming. No one sits at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and says, boy, I wish I had something more to do
Right.
because I'm out of things. So it's kind of formalized, standing back from the day to day and saying, where are we? And where do we want to go? And kind of compare that to where you are. I mean, the nice thing about having a plan, it gives you at least a touch point to sort of say, all right, how are we doing versus where we thought we would, how are we versus where we would like to be or where we expected to be.
And we talked about some of that in other episodes around goals and strategies, but part of what I hear you saying is have a vision for where you want to be so that maybe growth doesn't sneak up on you and you'll be better prepared for it when it comes. But what are some of those flashing red lights that I should be paying attention to that says you've maybe waited a little too long to make some changes here? What are some things that could really be signaling for me?
Sure. Some of it's processes. If you have two people sitting across the desk from one another, and that is the entire process. Maybe that's order entry and purchasing. They're both kind of aware of the full job and what each of them are doing, and the processes are pretty simple. I mean, as you grow and there are more people in that process, including somebody maybe at the end of the process that's sitting in a whole different area of the building. If people aren't aware of exactly how their job relates to the overall process, there can be issues. I mean, the process needs to be formalized. I mean, we've seen instances where, somebody upstream doesn't really realize that if their information that they're passing downstream isn't, triple checked and precise, that, at the end of the process, when someone's ordering something, I mean, if the numbers don't make sense, it takes, a multiple of the few minutes they save by not triple checking something to check it. And in the worst case, I mean, if Murphy's Law is in effect, that the wrong part gets ordered, it goes out to a job site, and that job site's 2 hours away, so it can cost a lot of money. So it's process, it's information systems, it's training. You're bringing on new employees, and if you see dumb things being done, is that kind of an indication that that the training is not where it should be? I mean, I believe most people want to do a good job, and if they're getting thrown in the deep end of the pool without sufficient training, that's not going to be a good thing. I think a lot of it just comes down to, does senior management feel that they have their arms around the business? Are new initiatives going off crisply? Or things kind of taking too long and getting muddled down. So again, none of this is one size fits all, and all these indicators happen at the same time. But there tend to be stressors out there that kind of surface subtly, and it's that the challenge is kind of seeking those out. And often it starts with the numbers. Looking at the numbers and sort of seeing that there seem to be some things that look a little curious or odd. Again, not necessarily, but by the time there are flashing red lights, something is probably broken, and you don't want to wait that long.
Tell me more about that. What do you think is the CFO's role in helping us make sure that we are going to get there and are ready to keep the good habits, but get rid of the things that won't take us there? As far as
Sure. Maybe an example will help to kind of, illustrate what I'm talking about. So, the company it was our busy season. We were growing. And looking at the numbers, the inventory turns were slowing. And when you're busy, that's not a good thing. When you're busy, you should be running through inventory. Sales are up. So if anything, your inventory turn should be increasing. And it wasn't dramatic. It was curious. And so the first question you sort of say is, all right, do I just write this off as an anomaly and, maybe it'll rectify itself next month? But, we decided to look into it. And in looking into it, we found it was really the returns inventory that was growing. And long story short, this was a project company did projects, and customers would change the items they wanted on the project. So they would decide, while they ordered blue, they really wanted green. And so the blue would have to be returned. And sometimes that got all the way to the job site before the change was made. And the change business was good business. Well, we discovered at one of our locations that stuff on jobs wasn't coming back on a timely basis. And then you kind of say, well, why is that? Well, it turns out that, because everyone was busy, priority was on getting the jobs completed, not necessarily bringing the product back. At a second location, we found they had much better processes for bringing product back from jobs, but it was then sitting in their local warehouse, and they weren't forwarding it on a timely basis to the central warehouse for returns. So, and there it was, the warehouse people, again, didn't realize they weren't doing a good job, didn't know that it was kind of time constrained. It was time constrained as to when you could return product. So the fixes were pretty simple, but had we not looked into this, product that sits out on the job site, if it's not brought back on a timely basis, the longer it's out there, the greater the chances it's going to get lost, walk away, or become damaged. And if you don't return product on a timely basis, either you get less return credit for it, or the vendors won't accept it back at all. So these could have turned into very large inventory hits. Had we not taken this subtle sign that inventory turns were kind of slowing. And again, the choice is, do you look into it? And also this is not something I'm giving the abridged version. This is not something that took us 2 hours and we got to the bottom of it. It was probably a couple of weeks because, everybody in finance had, things they had to deal with. You had to involve other areas of the company. So it was, it took some time, probably a couple of weeks. But, and this is not an isolated, this happens kind of all the time, that you see something and have to get to the bottom of it. And as I say, oftentimes it starts with the numbers, although, what kind of you see in one area often affects other areas. This was warehouse and operations that sort of started from an inventory question.
It's a good analogy for sort of any situation, because the longer any situation that is no longer serving the company is out there, the more complex it gets, and the more likely it's going to really disrupt something or become a larger issue or really impact the company. And so the sooner you can sort of identify it, pay attention to some of those blinking red lights, do your due diligence to figure out what's going on, and then, oh, well, here's the fix. As you said, it was a simple fix because you caught it in time. It would have been a much more complex fix had it, gone on and on and on. Do you agree? Is it important that we really try to keep our minds and our attention open to these things so that we can address them quickly?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, if you're in a situation where your company's growing and you haven't seen, you're doing things that the way you've always done and you've not seen any problems, maybe you're just not looking hard enough, and maybe it's going to kind of come back and hurt you. I think the fix in both cases was the same. Let the techs know that they got to bring back stuff on a timely basis, and let the warehouse people know that they've got to return stuff on a timely basis. The difference is that had it sat there, in our case, it could have been a couple $100,000 hit if this had continued for much longer.
Fascinating stuff. John Martin from ProCFO Partners, thanks so much for sharing some time with us today, talking about what got you here won't get you there. I think there's a lot more to explore with this, with visioning and with resources and with growth and goals and strategies. And I hope you'll come back another time and we'll dig into it.
It's been a pleasure, Chris.
Thanks, John. Have a great day.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for watching, and a special thanks to our subscribers. Consider becoming one today. Visit ProCFOPartners.com for more strategies and ideas for financial management and growth to help you put your business's financial picture in context.